I had to watch the movie again to do this.
I have had zero prep, so I feel like since I took the easier side here, um, now we're on slightly better playing fields, huh?
Fair enough. Um, yeah, I just watched the movie again. That was all I
I
did.
just couldn't bring myself to
Oof.
buy Disney Plus to rewatch it, so
Well, there are ways to do that without paying, but sure.
well, that's true. Oh boy, Ruth Ann, you are in for a treat. You haven't seen the movie.
Have you seen the other movies so you have some context?
Is that question for Ruth Ann or for me?
Yeah, I know you have.
Okay. I actually haven't seen Star Wars 9 because 8 was so bad.
Yeah. Well, I'm a glutton for punishment.
Like, I've actually heard from people who liked uh, Star Wars that 9 wasn't as bad, but
I think, well, for the purposes of this discussion, it was horrible, and 8 was obviously the good one.
oh, okay, you've seen the good ones then, you're good. Ruth Ann's seen all the originals and the prequels.
But does she like the prequels?
Yeah, what is your opinion on the prequels, Ruth Ann?
Oh, here, one sec. I'll let you in. Okay.
Oh, hi.
Hello.
Yeah, so I love the first three. I grew up on those. The original three. The prequels, nah. Oh, they are all right, fair and middling. But like the last one was like, you know, darn it, these are just getting worse and worse. I don't like. I feel like I'm wasting my time by the last one.
Yes, you have definitely wasted your time with the last one. Hi, Luke and Aiden and Halliboy. Welcome to the debate, I guess. Oh, and Stephen. Hello, Stephen. Oh, nice picture.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you want to do this? Do you want to make like an opening statement and then I'll make one, or the other way around, then we can talk about it?
Oh man, I've never actually done a debate before. So yeah, I think that's good. Why don't you would you mind doing the first opening statement so I can get something together and
Yeah. Well, let's wait a few minutes then. You can think about it, and we'll. Stephen, you want to say something?
sure.
Stephen, are you there? Nope. Okay. Okay, I guess I'll start. So I am choosing to argue the side of Episode 8 was a good movie, I guess. Although obviously, I guess I should give you some background about my Star Wars experience. So I got into it when the special editions came out, and it changed my life, I guess you could say. It showed me the power of stories, and how they can influence people. And I was young enough during the prequels that I was very excited about them, and I don't like basically anything Disney has done with it. However, I think that Episode 8 had a good, what was the best of all of them that they made, and the reason is because of Luke's story, which everyone picks on and says that was the reason why it was bad. I think Luke's story was actually the reason that Episode 8 was good. So you have to remember that this is 30 years after Episode 6, and granted, I would have liked to see what caused him to change his perspective from optimistic to a grumpy old man hiding out in a cave. However, it was 30 years, so that could have happened. It would have been better if we saw it, but we're jumping ahead. And when it came out, personally, just like I resonated with Luke in Episode 6, in the originals from 4 to 6, when he was thrust out of his life and he was journeying into a different world, and he was exposed to to new information that he never would have had. He went on that normal hero's journey. I think that it was more of a religious transformation than anything else in the originals. Um, and I've gone through a similar thing myself where I was not so religious and then I became religious older in life. And when you completely change, it doesn't have to be religion, but when you change your whole community from one way of living to another, you join a different community, there's a honeymoon period, I guess you could say, where you think that the second community, the new community is better than the rest, and you're engrossed in all of the things that you see they're beneficial. But after a while, you start to notice the flaws in the dogma of the community. And I think that I was going through that at the same time that episode 8 was coming out. So it kind of resonated with me, that when you get older, in episode 6, Luke he doesn't have so much experience with the Jedi. He's never seen the Jedi at the height of their powers like in the prequels. He's just met 2 people who said, do these things and you'll get these powers and you'll experience life in a different way. But when he gets when he can see the forest for the trees after the 30 years go by, he's rightfully, understandably frustrated with the situation, and he's frustrated with the fact that people look up to him and think that he is a hero when he knows all his faults. When you can see the faults in the Jedi, when he could see the faults, because everyone has faults, he focused on that and was frustrated and confused with why people treated him so highly. And I think the arc of his character in episode 8 was him coming to realize the power of stories, and that people, if you put a nice story together, if you put a myth out there that people can relate to and learn from, so then it's worth being that light to the galaxy. It's worth standing up for what you believe in and giving and showing that light to people so that they can have a good mentor to strive for the better. And I think the movie did that well.
All right, cool. Well, I guess I'll open with the fact that um, so a little bit of background on my Star Wars experience is that I was 9 years old when Star Wars Episode 1 came out in the theaters. I was aware of Star Wars previously, but it was the first one I saw in the theaters. And while the original trilogy will always be the best, the prequels will always, especially Episode 1, will always have a special place in my heart because, well, there was a lot of good stuff in there. And we got Star Wars Racer for Nintendo 64 out of Episode 1, and that alone, between that and the Jedi Apprentice series, I feel like those were worth suffering through Jar Jar Binks for. Um, so anyway, I spent the next 7 years of my childhood obsessed with Star Wars, just pretty much eat, sleep, and breathing everything Star Wars. I shouldn't admit that, but it was a part of my life, so we'll go with it. And all of that to say, the height of my Star Wars fandom back in the day, that wasn't even a word people used back then, was that they had a story writing contest where you could enter backstories of characters and planets and things. And I got a teeny tiny piece of one of the submissions that I wrote as a kid accepted, and it was and had credit in uh, on Wikipedia and in the official Star Wars databank until Disney bought it, and now they've just obliterated all of that stuff. But so my contribution to the Star Wars galaxy was giving the little girl who tells Anakin his pod racer is never going to run a little bit of brains in her head, and I have an unclaimed Wikipedia page, so that's my. Uh, that's about as good as it gets, but I thought that was pretty cool back in high school. Um, all of that being said, my take on episode 8 was that I have never been in a movie theater where my immediate reaction when the credits were rolling was, I need to go home and watch Star Wars Episode 2. And my immediate follow up thought to that was I need to go home and rethink my life. Yeah, yeah. Uh, I'll give you a little more. Go ahead, you first.
Oh, I was gonna ask, did you feel the same way about episode 7?
It didn't. I was actually okay, so that was actually where I was gonna go with this next, is that I was willing to give J.J. Abrams the benefit of the doubt, in spite of the fact that Star Wars 7 was basically just A New Hope, bigger and badder. Um, there was so much opportunity for like, I wanted to see how all of those characters I was really excited. I was like, "This feels more like Star Wars than even the prequels." I actually got out of the theater with Star Wars 7, and I was with my dad, and I was like, "Dad, I would love to see J.J. Abrams redo the prequels because they probably feel more like Star Wars uh, than the other ones, um, than the prequels themselves did, because 7 felt to me a lot more like the original trilogy, which I think is just it's its own thing, and it really was as groundbreaking. Like, I mean, everything has kind of anything spacey has echoes of it now. Um, but yeah, I was excited. I was willing to overlook the fact that it wasn't a particularly good story because I was very excited to see where they were going to take all of the new characters. I was like, I'm curious to see like who is Ray and who's Finn and who's Poe and who are all these new characters if we get some good adventures and some I mean, when I go to the galaxy far, far away, I'm looking for some escapism. And and I was like, if we get another, 10 years worth of fun escapist stories that we can enjoy together, then I'm willing to overlook the poor structure in the first one.
Mhm. Okay.
Uh, yeah, I would say that in the second one, it just and so therefore I was forgiving of things like, you know, the death of Han Solo. Like, sad, didn't like it. Um, but I was like, all right, if they do a good job with these new characters, then perhaps we can overlook that as well. But then, episode 8 opens up and they were like making a joke out of things that like they were just making their characters look really bad and not interesting. Like there's that whole part at the beginning where I think it's Finn wakes up and he's like walking around with water squirting all over and I was like the tone of this is just it's so off, you know?
I think he was going for the episode 2 R2 and C3PO clunky comedy.
Perhaps. And you know what? If the story had been good, we could have if that was it, I could have also been forgiving there, uh
I
I felt like go ahead, go ahead.
I was gonna say I think that the hate that the movie gets is kind of a backlash to a lot of things. Meaning, I don't
Yeah.
think people were upset with episode 8 as much as they were upset with episode 7 and the fact that it was clear Disney didn't have a plan going forward and they were rushing it. Um, Meaning, if you were upset that Luke changed his personality, then you should have been equally as upset that they completely changed Han's personality. He went on an arc in the originals where he was the scoundrel who saw the benefit of doing what was right instead of whatever he wanted. He settled down, he had a kid, or let's say he got married, right? And also, you
Mhm.
have to. Both of us know this, but I don't know how many other people it was meaningful for. But the hardcore Star Wars fans going into Episode 7 were kind of pissed off anyway because we saw Han and Leia have 3 kids, and there was this whole vast amount of stories that were told that Disney just said, "Yeah, we're actually getting rid of that." So I was going into Episode 7 thinking Han had spent years being a good father and raising 3 kids and staying with Leia. And then we go into episode 7, and all of a sudden he's like, yeah, I left. I didn't really care. I went back to smuggling because it was more fun or something.
Yes, I would say it was definitely it's actually episode 8 that made me less forgiving of episode 7, because when I left the theater after seeing 7, I was like, "Okay, new beginnings, let's see what happens." When I left the theater with 8, I was like, "Wow, 7." It was like it's like in 7, I was this kid in a sandbox and the bully was coming up and bullying me, but I didn't realize it.
Yep.
And in 8, it was when the bully actually, like, grabbed my toys and started breaking them, and here, like, I thought that it was somebody who wanted to play and wanted to, have some good conversation and whatever, and then in episode 8, it made me realize how stupid I had been, uh
Okay.
because, like because yes, like, going back and looking at it, what a disappointment that Han Solo, yeah, for those of us who have read the books, like, the Thrawn trilogy was beautiful. It was a masterpiece as far
Hmm.
as, characters and story arcs, like, some of my very favorite characters from the Star Wars galaxy were either from the Thrawn trilogy or fleshed out more there, and, um and I really enjoyed it, and then, like, to be able to see like, I remember where I was when I was reading the whole thing about, like, Han and Leia's children being born, and
Hmm.
I was, like, 15, but it was such a, like, pivotal scene in these books that I was like, "This is amazing." Um, and then in episode 8 or 7 where you get Han Solo like, "Oh yeah, I've just been a selfish smuggler all over again." And like him just being the perpetual bachelor, it was like, "Wait, where's like the hero part?" They
Yep.
took all the it's like they took all these great heroes who had these inspiring stories and, like I see Star Wars as this great opportunity to look at the qualities in each of the characters that I admire and go, "Wow, how can I, live that out in my own life to whatever extent that can actually be applicable?" And like I don't think anybody in their right mind should aspire to be like any of the characters in the new trilogy.
You want to say
Oh,
something,
yes.
Campbell?
Yeah, yeah. That's kind of
Candle.
interesting how the evolution of like you like the statistical evolution of like the values of the culture, let's say in general, are reflected in the movies like that. And then you can see that it's even it's even like not things that we want that traditionally like those old values are like more those old characters are more emulatable or there's a desire to emulate those values, but the new values that they gave are not something that is kind of like leaves like a bad taste in your mouth.
Well, I think in
Just an
general, yeah, I agree with you. The modern morality is kind of so. This is I was gonna say this also about why episode 8 was good. So the bad guys in episode 8 are the ones taking on the modern morals, because to me the modern morality is like there is no objective truth, and therefore you should just pursue your hedonistic whims to their fullest. And that was Kylo Ren's whole pitch to Rey. It was,
Mhm.
yeah, forget about Luke. Forget about whatever came before you. You don't have to fit in with society. You don't have to fit in with a group. You should be able to dominate everyone and do whatever it is you like. Let the past die. Kill it if you have to. And it wasn't because I'm upset with people that came before. I looked at that as Kylo was basically saying, I don't want to be influenced by anyone. I want to be my true self, right? And Rey was flirting with that through the whole movie because they wrote her very poorly through the whole trilogy, that she was perfect all along and the world was trying to keep her down, and really she was the one who if in order to fulfill her potential, she just had to convince the world she was always right, which is modern mentality, which is why she was able to listen to Kylo's argument and want to join him, because they did have similar mentalities of, no, you're actually just supposed to pursue your hedonistic pleasures. And Luke in that movie was the voice of reason, who was saying, at when he was in like the grumpy old guy at the beginning of the movie, he was saying that
Mhm.
the society and the Jedi had faults, and therefore they had problems, and he didn't want to continue it because of that, but he still wasn't saying I'm going to do what I want. He was at a loss. Whenever new information enters whenever you encounter chaos and you realize that you have to absorb some of it, you end up, like Jordan Peterson says, right, that when the Jews left Egypt, they had to go to the desert before they got to the promised land. Because anytime chaos comes into your life, it gets worse before it gets better. So Luke was in that desert where he didn't know what to do. And then Yoda comes and gives him this pep talk that just because you fail doesn't mean that you should give up. Failure is something you can learn from. And he put that into practice at the end of the movie and saved a bunch of people so they could keep fighting by sacrificing his life, which was the antithesis to what Kylo's purpose was. Kylo said, let the past die, kill it if you have to, do whatever you want. And Luke said, no, I'll sacrifice my life for the community, because passing on continuing the culture and continuing the Jedi is more important than doing whatever you feel like in your hedonistic nonsense.
How deep? Wow, that's how deep in that movie. I have to go. It's been a wonderful conversation so far. I love that I was able to be part of. So thank you.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, Ari. Like, if did I say your name right? I want to make sure I got it. Okay, cool. So how would you say that Luke preserved the Jedi in that? Because, he made the decision to destroy the books about all of that. And like the way I've seen kind of the whole Star Wars story is that, you've got the light side and the dark side, and basically the Jedi Order is order and the dark side is chaos. And like, tell me like a little bit, I'm not sure I fully follow your argument as far as equating what Luke did with saving the Jedi.
So Luke didn't actually burn the books. He went to do it, and Yoda stopped him. And then Yoda laughed about it because he knew that Rey already had taken the books out of the tree and put them on the ship. So when Yoda struck down the tree, which was stupid because he shouldn't have been able to interact with the physical world, but even good movies make mistakes. When he did that, Luke tried to go in and save the books.
Okay.
Sometimes it takes how do I say this right? Luke was having a frustrating time understanding what the Jedi should stand for and if they were worthwhile. And for me, in my life, it becomes clearer what you should do when you see people doing the opposite, as opposed to when you're around all the same people. So if Luke goes and starts a Jedi Academy, and he has however many students, and Kylo's one of them, and if that's what he's engrossed in, so he's only going to be looking at the quote-unquote Jedi and trying to improve them. So he'll see faults in them. But as soon as he goes outside of that, if you go to the people that are living selfishly, and then it like reaffirms how you should obviously be a Jedi, because look at how silly those people are acting. And you can see the value of the Jedi more when you're around people that aren't keeping those same moral values. So I think that he couldn't have preserved the Jedi because the Jedi were already destroyed before he became a Jedi, right? They were destroyed in Episode 3, and they never, well, at least in this series, and at least in the new Disney nonsense, they never, it didn't continue from that. Luke started a new thing, right? The rules were changed. He got married, and he didn't have issues with the non-attachment rules, right? So the Jedi were in either the EU or Legends. Either way, the Jedi had to evolve and become something else. But that when you change something, that doesn't mean you destroy everything. You can improve on it. You find new information, and you can improve on what it was. So I think he was trying to do that, and he felt that Rey. Yoda told him that Rey could carry it on, so he felt secure in Yoda's blessing. He didn't really know Rey so much, so I don't fault him for that.
Nobody knows Rey so much.
That's true.
Yeah, it's interesting because like, hang on, I want to make sure I get this kind of as succinctly as possible. So like, are you saying then that you view it as kind of almost a redemption arc sort of thing for Luke? Like,
yes,
okay, like, because he was so jaded, and
and he was
obviously
understandably jaded. It just,
sure.
but only the movie didn't do a good job setting that up. Like the whole sequel trilogy, the biggest issue I have with it was they skipped all the good parts.
Yeah,
And they do that with the TV shows also. Like when Luke meets Ahsoka for the first time, oh, we don't see that. It's really the second time, and they don't really say anything to each other. Like this is the most consequential meeting that Luke will have after Episode 6, and you don't show that on screen. Instead, you just show them passing by in the night, saying hello to each other after they've already
sure.
met before. Like that's the issue with that's not the issue with the movie. That's the issue with the whole setup of the timeline they put the movies in, and what Disney's continuing to do. There's no inciting incident, or the most important inciting incidents they're skipping to tell you about some random thing that happened. So
Yeah,
so but I personally understood what Luke was going through at the time, so I didn't have such an issue with him starting in that place. I think that
yeah, I
most
find
people
that
were upset about it because subconsciously or unconsciously they were upset about Han and couldn't understand why. Because Episode 7 was a look, these are the shiny toys that you used to like as a kid. So everyone was on board, and then they went into Episode 8 thinking we're going to get more shiny toys. But then the toys had a different paint job, and they were confused. But they should have realized Episode 7 was the same thing. They already started doing that.
yeah, yeah, we just didn't know at the time. Yeah, I find it interesting that you say that the like, with the Luke arc and all of the other stuff, like, they didn't show the right stuff on screen, because I do feel that, if the purpose of Episode 8 had been more solely focused on that Luke arc in the way that you described it, I think I could have seen that as a really interesting, piece of art. Um, I felt like there was so much in Episode 2 that was just random garbage that, like, it didn't enhance the plot. I mean, the whole I don't
Whoa,
even remember what
whoa! I know everyone says Episode 2 is the worst movie before Disney put anything
sorry,
out.
sorry, Episode 8. I'm
Oh,
sorry,
oh,
8.
okay, okay.
No, 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 no. My bad, my bad. Thanks for correcting me. No, in 8, there was, like I don't even remember what they were chasing after, but there was, like, a whole MacGuffin where half of them like, they split the party and they went to some weird planet that, like, if I remember right,
I'm
like
not defending the plot. The plot was horrible.
yeah, I just wonder, like, if they had perhaps gone more focusing on the Luke bits, would it have been better and more interesting? And I mean, my thought, just kind of gut reaction, is yes, because um
Hmm.
like there was so much of it that was so bloated, and it was all these characters we just didn't know, so we didn't care about them. Um
Yeah.
like it would have been interesting if they had given some of the new characters. I was so excited for 8 because I was so excited to finally get some backstory for their characters. Um, and I was really looking forward to actually liking the new characters more. I'm like, all right, if they're getting rid of the old characters, then how can we like the new ones better?
I
And
think,
then they,
would you agree that that's kind of a cope? Because I had the same feeling. Like when they canceled the EU, that was like, oh, that was a shocking revelation in my life. Like I couldn't believe they did that. And then so going into Episode 7, I was like, it's still Star Wars. There are characters that I connect with. I'll go. But it wasn't like I'm so excited for the next book coming out. So I already had like such
yeah,
lower expectations.
yeah, yeah, I think there was some of that, to be sure. I mean, yeah, I mean, I literally spent 7 years of my childhood studying all of the minute details. Like, I was the nerd who had, the guide to vehicles and vessels
Oh, I
and the
had all
guide
those.
to
Sure.
planets and moons,
Yeah,
and,
those were great.
eh, like, my favorite book I would get out from the library because, I don't know, isn't it what everybody should be reading, was the Star Wars Encyclopedia? Uh,
I had that.
I'm,
Was
like,
it a 3 volume set?
poring over. No, it was just the original
Oh.
one, which had Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, their outlines, but Luke had the red saber and Vader had the blue one.
I remember that. Yeah.
It's like a hardbound, yeah, and it had all these great pictures from the different movies, and I think even some random puppets that weren't even in the movies. Um, and it's yeah, it is interesting it was frustrating to me because I was like, "Oh my goodness, all this stuff I spent all this time on," because there was actually a purpose to it back in the day. I actually wanted to write Star Wars novels when I grew up, and I would write all these, yeah, stories and scenarios and things, and so I was going for all the minutia because I was like, "This is if I'm going to do this, then I'm gonna need to know all these things," and then they kind of, yeah, just destroyed all of it, and it's been weird, like, I've seen the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian, and it's been really weird to me to watch them take things that were parts of the EU and some of these other things, um, but, like, use it as an inspiration, but not as the actual thing. I'm like, "Alright, it's cool to see that creature that was never on camera before, but it's in a totally different, like, setting than what I was expecting it to be because, like, I remember that entry in the Guide to Aliens and whatever, and that's not where it's supposed to be. That kind of it's like watching a strange alternate reality.
Yep, for sure.
Um, so there we've got some interesting comments in here, Ari. I was thinking we could maybe go through a little bit of them
Okay.
if you're cool with that.
Sure.
So Ruth Ann said, "I wonder if they took such a
Mhm.
random stance and tore down the heroes to help destroy the story that the viewers would try to live out." And I certainly felt like that when I was watching it. It was really interesting because I felt like, it came out in 2018, I think, and it was really strange to see, like, I Ari, did you like Rogue One? What did you think about that one?
It wasn't offensive to me.
Okay.
So yes.
I really What was that?
So yes, because it didn't make me upset about anything.
Okay. Yeah.
Although
I
the,
I
the characters were very stale.
Yeah, I really liked it just because I liked that they were making it a little more. Well, first of all, I did not have as I was not putting as much critical thinking into it at the time. But I liked it because I really enjoyed that it was kind of a less like it was a little bit darker and like, there were scenes in there where um just for example, you got the stormtroopers armor kind of smashing when the one guy hit it with his staff and stuff. And I was interested to see like a little bit more of a PG-13 Star Wars instead of a PG Star Wars. Like I thought that would be an interesting take. I agree. Like on rewatching it, the characters weren't as good as I had originally thought they might be. But it was interesting because I kind of had this weird, just kind of vague feeling in the back of my mind that like, okay, it ended the way it did, and they killed off the characters and all this stuff um, because it was 2016. Trump had just gotten into office. All I saw were these like Hollywood writers just being annoyed at the political landscape and being like, we're gonna, write some stuff that people, we're gonna write something where it's kind of a doomsday thing because this is kind of how we feel. And I was like, I don't really like that, but it doesn't bother me because it's a good enough story that it holds its own for the most part.
They also
Where
had to kill them because of otherwise why didn't we see them later?
Sure. And that was fine, but and it was such a back of my mind thing that like it didn't bother me. Whereas in 2018 when The Last Jedi came out, it just felt like somebody was super disenchanted with the political landscape. And like I
Hmm.
don't go to Star Wars uh to have politics, Like I go to Star Wars
That's a
stuff. I
contentious
do
thing to
think.
say.
Yeah, I know. Um
Not because I mean I'm
and,
not
and
arguing with you on that, but there has been the debate when people say that the people that are pro Disney Star Wars say, but George Lucas always put politics into the story. I mean, the Ewoks were supposed to be the Viet Cong, and like it was about the rise of fascism in the country in general, in the world in general. So I think that
Sure.
rejoinder that you normally say to that is it was inspired by those things, but they were still focused on the story as opposed to pushing a
Yes.
message first. And secondly, have you read the Star Wars Archives books?
Which ones are those?
They were written by Paul Duncan. There's two versions. You should get the huge ones, but they're a bit expensive. They're very, very, very cool. There are hundreds and hundreds of pages. One's for 4 to 6,
Uh-huh.
and one's for 1 to 3. And he basically just goes through all of these interviews, and it's like the backstory behind making of all the 6 movies.
I have not read those. No.
They're very cool. So
Cool.
in the episode 1, 2, and 3 one, so George is asked, or George in one of these interviews says, when I was writing any Star Wars movie, so I would write every day, but before I started writing in the morning, I would sit and read for 3 to 4 hours every day.
Mm.
And I was reading philosophy and mythology and religion, and I was researching cultures to see what everyone agreed on was good and what everyone agreed on was bad. And then I had like a clear understanding of, well, humans in general will say this is good and that is bad. And then I can build my characters off of these foundational human principles. So he was going back into the foundations of what humans in general have said are good and bad. So even
Sure.
though he based it off of, or he had politics in it, it was more of a, this is what the cultures of the world have to say. And I think the new movies, and not just Star Wars, but I mean, just look at what's happening to Hollywood. It's more about, this is how we feel now and nothing else. Like, it doesn't matter what other cultures say. I'm right because I'm me, and I'll put that in my movie. And it's a lot of shallow. It's just a bunch of shallow nonsense. So I would agree with you that Episode 8, for example, the reason that Luke was put in that position was not because, I don't think it was because Rian Johnson had this wonderful idea, but it was
Right.
because he wanted to deconstruct Luke, because Luke is a heterosexual white guy and he has all the power, so
Right.
we have to tear him down. Like, okay, but if that's very good, even if that's your reasoning, I could still see how it worked in the story, and it didn't upset me as much. Also, like I said,
Okay.
I wasn't so excited about it going into it.
Sure. Yeah, I guess I was fairly politically and culturally aware going into episode 8, and because of that, I just like it was so much more of a it just kind of felt like this weird like slap in the face as far as like okay, I can't even immerse myself in this story because yeah, like toxic masculinity, and let's make the main new character like super smart and super talented and all this stuff when like she had nothing going for her. And like to me that was such a disappointment because I was like, man, I would love to see like I don't care whether it's a girl or a guy, like I just want to see a good character because
Yeah,
it's
I
like
mean the
anybody can find
argument
inspiration.
against Star Wars fans thinking that, or people saying, "Oh, you're racist and sexist for not liking these movies."
Right.
Like, we're the same people that liked Mara Jade and Padme and Ahsoka for
Yes.
most people. Like, that's just a silly argument.
Yeah, it is a silly argument, and I think it detracts from like the important stuff, which is it was a bit of just that whole like what would you call it, like postmodern nonsense, like that it didn't get particularly deep. There were not It was very much a this is the way I feel, so I'm just gonna do it sort of a thing. And I agree with you, like to go back a little bit for on the yes, Star Wars has always been political. Like I honestly attribute a lot of my appreciation for politics to Star Wars. Like there was a lot
Mm-hmm.
of politics in episode 1. And I would say I probably wouldn't have found that as interesting
Yep.
as a kid and as an adult. Like I'll sometimes sit in and listen to like watch the live video on like different current events when there's something being broadcast from like the Senate floor or something like that. And to me it's fascinating because I'm like, this is humanity, this stuff's important. And I really think a lot of that was because I enjoyed so much the politics in Star Wars as it was presented, which was removed far enough that it was still the story, like what you were saying.
So
And
I should say something else about George Lucas.
Mhm.
So when he was writing those movies, especially 1, 2, and 3, but in general 4, 5, and 6 also. I should say 4, 5,
Yeah.
and 6. So he wanted to give over. He said he looked around the culture and said, young boys in particular, but the younger generation in general, is coming off
Mhm.
this horrible world situation. We just had the Cold War. Everyone is scared out of their minds. They think the world is in a horrible place. I need to give
Yeah.
them the correct morals. Okay, well,
Mm.
I could just tell them, here's a list of these morals, but no one will listen to me. So I'm going to give over these morals, and I'll just put them in a pretty picture so they'll want to go and see it, and then it will resonate with them.
Yeah.
Specifically about the politics in episode 1, 2, and 3, I don't know why people are so against those movies. I think that they should be required viewing for everyone right now, because the Democrats will say that Palpatine is Trump, and the people on the right will say that what the Democrats are doing right now to trying to sow fear in the populace and take power for themselves. Like, either way, whatever side you're on, whichever way you want to look at it, like,
Sure.
the way Palpatine took power and turned a quote unquote democracy into a dictatorship and ultimately an empire is literally what is happening right now.
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting because I remember when Trump got in office driving home after the election results were delivered, going, I don't know if this is a really good thing or if this is that moment where everybody's clapping because the senators become the emperor and things are going to be horrible. Like, it was kind of a wait and watch sort of thing for me. I had no idea he was such a wild card. And like, I liked that he was a wild card, but I was like, I have no idea. I think he'll be a better candidate, but I have no idea how it's going to play out. And
You talking about
it is
2016?
yeah,
Uh-huh.
2016.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting to watch how, like, I do think economically and socially and even, like, some of the stuff he's done with I mean, he seemed to be less like, I always think less government power is better.
Of
And so
course.
it's a little, concerning to me to be seeing all of that consolidation of power now,
Mm-hmm.
um, and being like, "Yep, this could go real bad real fast."
Well, I said this to you before we started, well, a few days ago when we were talking about doing this, that I didn't really want to
Yeah.
debate because I'm not interested in winning. I'm interested in finding out truth, and even though
Yeah.
you might not claim there's a truth in this movie or whatever, like, just trying to understand each other's perspectives. And I think that the issue in the politics right now is you just have people lying to each other blatantly because they don't care
Yes.
about the truth. Like, if you watch I don't know if you watch the debate, but like, both
Not
sides
yet.
are saying stupid things and lying openly, and they just get away with it. It's very disheartening to me to see the whole. I don't think you can win no matter who wins the election now, because both
No.
sides of the country is being torn apart because they're trying to feed division and take more power. I don't know which side is doing that more, but like, there's not many people saying we should come together and try to work this out. But to be fair, I don't think that's possible right now because so many people are they see the world in a fundamental different way. You
Yeah,
can't
I
live
don't
in the same community where one person is saying you should judge people based on merit and the other one is saying I can do whatever I want. Screw you.
Yeah, I don't think it's possible on a macro level for sure. I mean, that's where you get into like where politics devolves into slogans on people's bumper stickers.
Yeah.
But I think on a micro level, that's where people can make those changes. For example, like uh I have a relative who is very um opposite of me, politically speaking, and we really enjoy talking together because uh, I feel like we're able to at least
You also
come
know
to an
each other.
agreement,
You
even
know
if
each other.
yeah. Well, and I have some friends around town as well, though, who are like that. Like, I have some friends who were big, Bernie Sanders supporters, and uh, back in the day, and like he even ran for senator at one point and stuff. Like, I have some friends who are pretty politically active and definitely not on the same side as me, and I really enjoy getting to talk to people like that because I at least get to understand where they're coming from, and if they're willing to talk to me, like, I've had people say, "Boy, if all gun owners were as responsible as you, the world I would be less anti-Second Amendment." And I'm like, "Well, how many other gun owners have you talked to? Because this is the bulk of, like, I'm not saying anything new or profound, you know?"
Sure.
Similar stuff on other topics, but I do think but you're right as far as I haven't I have been the best I've been able to come to when I talk with people who disagree with me is a mutual, like, agreement to disagree because that foundation um, is so different. Like you said, if one is based on merit and the other is based on, I don't know what you said, race or something, uh,
Whatever they want to do.
or whatever they wanna call it, um, the only thing I can think of that would ever change people's opinion in that case is, I mean, you gotta go through the school of hard knocks, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I was more left-leaning when I was a college student who had lots of grant and scholarship money, so I basically got paid to go through my first bits of college, and when I dropped out of college and lost all those scholarships and had to work as a cashier for a year and a half and had people coming through my line buying, like, steaks and ribs on their food stamps while I was just barely
Hmm.
scraping by to pay my rent and get hot dogs, like, that very fundamentally changed my view,
Yeah. Well,
things
what's
like
the, I don't remember who said it, but there's a famous phrase like, if you're not a liberal when you're young, you have no heart. And if you're not a conservative when you're
yes.
older, you have no brain.
Yeah, and I think I do think that the people who tend to be more liberal when things start to and let's say progressive, right?
Okay.
People who tend to be more progressive, like, it's kind of that somebody posted about this on the Peterson Academy social last night was the or this morning, it was, oh, what is it called? Like, they're the beliefs you can have because you are able to the term's escaping me right now, but essentially you're so far removed from these problems that you're able to have these super idealistic beliefs. Like, all cops are bad. Like, that's really easy for somebody who lives in a gated community to decide is
Yeah.
something they want to hold
They don't see
uphold.
the need for them.
Yeah, exactly, and but, like, people who actually live in bad neighborhoods, like, they don't have the benefit of being that far removed from the problems to be able to agree with something like that, like, anything to that effect, so I think that's where we like, how do you I think a lot of people who hold some very idealistic points of view that happen to be lean towards the more progressive side of things, like, the only way they're gonna see that differently is to have life smack them around a little bit, unfortunately.
Yeah. I don't know how you. Hmm. It seems to me that the left side of America is trying to keep people um, emotionally charged. It seems to me that they don't really have they don't attack the arguments, they attack the person. Oh, you're a racist, so I don't have to listen to you. Or oh, you said this one thing once, so therefore everything you say I can ignore, as opposed to trying to actually deal with the arguments. But I think that it's not like a they're not trying to get away with it.
Yeah.
That's where the actual disagreement is. Like most of these hot button political issues, I think they're really
Mhm.
arguing about the same thing. The right is saying this is important to keep people safe. We need these things, and the left is saying like you're being mean in this moment. You should be nicer, without thinking
Yeah, and
about
I
the consequences in the future.
well, it's that short term what feels good instead of, like, the necessity to sacrifice, like, of feeling good in the moment for the greater good to come, right?
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. Well,
Yeah,
I want to try to
go
get
ahead.
back to the topic a little bit. Do
Yeah,
you?
sorry.
So you got invested in Star Wars from as soon as you saw it, basically, and you said it like dominated your life. Why do you think, like, what pulled? How did you get sucked into that? Like, why is Star Wars more? How did it happen with Star Wars as opposed to a different thing?
That's a good question. I think it was a little bit just I don't know, it just was I think part of it is that I come from a large family, and it was something that was, like, unique to me. It was kinda something that could be my own, whereas the other stuff that at the time that I was kind of into was all stuff I could share with my siblings, whereas nobody else really liked Star Wars as much, and, like, to me, the idea of having something different, I think, was kind of a draw to me. Like, my dad's really into the Tolkien stuff and
Mhm.
everything, and for years of my childhood, I was like, "Fantasy's stupid, sci-fi is the best," but, like, Star Wars is space fantasy,
Right.
and when I finally got mature enough to actually look into it, I was like, "Oh, actually, this stuff is amazing." I love Tolkien too, Ruthann. Uh,
So
in fact go
mhm.
ahead.
I was gonna say that for me, I when I was growing up, I didn't. I was an atheist basically,
Mhm.
and I accepted what I was being taught in school and by the culture, which was there's no moral right or wrong. The only reason we have
Mm,
laws is to protect people from the community, and therefore in my head, I logically came to the conclusion, okay, well, if there's no God, then I should be able to do whatever I want to whoever I want, and I shouldn't feel bad about it
sure.
because it's all all morals are socially constructed, and therefore none of this is real, right? And
Yep,
what kind of shocked me out of that system was Star Wars or Tolkien, or
that's
you
cool.
can say Harry Potter now, because
Sure, yeah.
it didn't make sense to me that I got invested in these stories and I could go to see this movie or just watch it, the VHS tape over and over again in my house and
Yep.
like be emotionally moved by something. Like it doesn't, obviously it wasn't just socially constructed. And once you actually research that, like Luke Skywalker's story is Harry Potter's story, is Frodo's story,
Yes.
is
Yep.
Abraham's story and Moses' story and Jesus' story. It's the same story. And so why are
Yes.
these stories resonating more so than all the other ones? Like maybe there's something that
Maybe there's some truth behind
right, like and like Peterson says, like it doesn't matter if the story happened. The truth of the story is that it's happening to
Mm.
everyone all the time. And if you live your
Yes.
life like this, you will have a better life, as opposed to living your life not caring about anyone except yourself. And so emotionally, I tried to suppress all my emotions, and I couldn't
Mm.
because I would actually feel bad if I did something that was like, let's say, mean to someone. Even though logically I couldn't
Yep.
explain it, it was still like, oh, but I feel bad. And this is why I brought up Kylo Ren in episode 8, because he was
Mhm.
like that was my logical understanding of the world at the time. Like, why does it matter what everyone else is saying? Just do what you want. But it's not a foundational belief. It won't work because you're not a blank slate that was corrupted by society. You actually were built a certain way, for lack of a better term, and you can't run away from the fact that you're a human.
Sure. Yeah, I that's interesting because I would say my worldview kind of also shaped my, appreciation of Star Wars because I grew up in this teeny tiny, um, like, it was this tiny church environment where, like, it was some people have called it a cult. I don't think I would go quite that far just because I think their doctrine of salvation was good enough that, it doesn't quite fit the bill, but they practice, like, extreme shunning, and they did not have a huge membership, like, all growing up, I would say the size of the church was roughly between 60 and 80 people, and I went to this little school that was an average of 13 kids between grades K through 12, uh, all those years. And for me, I think some of what really like I really appreciated the Jedi stuff because to me it kind of reflected
Yeah.
that that experience that I was kind of having at that church, which was, they thought they had all of the truth and they thought that, they were upholding these things that nobody else had. And in a way, like the whole Jedi, the Force, all this stuff was kind of this, to me, it seemed like a bit of a parallel. And so, like, growing
Hmm.
up, I really enjoyed the Jedi Apprentice series because it was, all the, um, growing up in the Jedi Temple and all this, and I felt very much estranged from the rest of society in some ways, aside from the very small society that I had. And so, in some ways, that was, I think, some of it was not having a lot of peers and stuff. It kind of made me go, okay, like here are all these characters who are like heroic and stuff and don't have a lot of people in their lives, and like I can relate to that more, maybe.
It's interesting. So
Yeah, I don't know if that's
well, if you're, I'm you you said that it was kind of like a cult, but not really like a cult. But then you also attributed it like a parallel between that world and the Jedi, and I'm assuming you think the Jedi are good. So
yes.
how did that help, or like what benefits did you take from growing up like that as a result of the fact that you can see a parallel between that and being Jedi, and what things did you want
Well,
could
back
be
then
improved?
I sure. So back then I saw all of it as good because I grew up in it, so I didn't know any better. Um, and I would say it definitely got more cult-like in the way that they behaved and stuff, over the years, right? So, my anyway, it's so yeah, when I was growing up as a kid, being told, "Hey, everything going on here is right." Yeah, all right. So I just took whatever parallels I could find in there, and I was like, "Well, we have all these rules, and they're different than everybody else, and but like at the end of the day, we want to take part in saving humanity to whatever extent that we can." So I suppose that's where the parallels were. I would say, as far as like where I grew up and that whole thing, where all that goes, and I think it's kind of what, like, for example, they were trying to get at kind of destroying the Jedi and the Disney stuff is this idea that like, well, this is too restrictive and it's all, it's too much. And while I don't like that the Disney take of like the Jedi are evil and stuff, because I think that's going a little too far. Um we'll put it that way. But like the structure in which I grew up was, I think, a great example of what happens when order becomes too orderly, and there's not enough chaos. And
Hmm.
I think what makes the Star Wars stuff so interesting is that it's this beautiful balance of like, you've got the order of the Jedi, but they're constantly struggling against the chaos of either, I mean, you could say the dark side, but even, I mean, you and I have read enough of the other stuff to know that like half of the adventures aren't even necessarily the dark side. They're just, different kinds of conflicts that
Hmm.
they encounter that they're just trying to make better. And, I think that's where the difference would come in, is that the group that I grew up in and that whole environment, it became stifling and it became too much order. Whereas I feel like with episode 8, the writers and stuff, they basically went the other way and introduced too much chaos.
Hmm. Do you Who do you think had it more right, the Jedi Council in the prequels or Luke?
Ooh. Uh, episode 8 Luke,
No, no, no.
or just Luke in general?
EU Luke. Whatever. What we call
Yeah,
Legends.
yeah.
Legends Luke.
Let's call it EU because that's
Yeah.
what's the better time anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, I think EU Luke had it better. I
Hmm.
honestly, like, my views on even things like religion have certainly changed, as far as I I used to be beholden to an institution and think that that's where, like, that is where the life in, like, spirituality, how do I put this? That is where I put my Christian life in, was the church that I grew up, the institution. Um, having gotten past that and left that place because there were just things that, like, I was reading my Bible going, "This is not doctrinally accurate," and, like, Christ did not act this way. Like, I'm being more of a Pharisee than anything else, and having that realization was what made me go, "Okay, I need to leave this." And so, like, in my life, I guess my religious experience that I've had has been more, I would say, getting away from the
Dogma.
whole structure. Yeah, the dogma side of it. And because like there were so many things we were told when I was a kid about like different denominations and all this stuff that like I've gone and checked out those churches now, and like half the stuff I was told wasn't even true, and half of
Hmm.
it was blown out of proportion. And when you meet other Christians from other denominations and backgrounds and stuff, it's like what I care about is that we have Christ in common, not like whether or not you say the rosary 6 times a day or something, you know?
Yeah, that makes
Um,
sense.
and so for me, yeah, I would say while I still have a special place in my heart for the Jedi Council of the Episode 1 era, I think that Luke had it more right in like and there were so many good stories with that too. You know, who was there was a kid who was in both the Kevin J. Anderson series um and the Timothy Zahn stuff, I think. Uh when Luke was like starting up his school and he was like it was like the whole I don't know, he was like getting pulled towards the dark side and stuff. I think he ended up going towards the dark side. Does this ring a bell at all? This is I'm thinking
Yes,
like
but I
16
haven't.
years ago when I read this stuff.
Yeah, I don't remember who it was.
Okay. Well, anyway, was Kip? Was it Kip Duron? That
Maybe,
name.
maybe. I mean,
Okay.
he was there. I don't know
Anyway,
if he was. I don't remember how old he was.
yeah. Anyway, just I. Whereas the Jedi Temple Jedi stuff was so much, perhaps too much order. I feel like the Luke stuff was definitely more about walking that line of order and chaos that
Hmm.
I think is just healthier for people overall.
Okay, so the non-attachment rule in the prequels and everything before that, right? Except for
Yes,
Kiadi which is hilarious. The
and let's not forget Qui-Gon and Tal, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So the idea of that, I think, for someone who's not religious or doesn't
Mhm.
believe that there's a world after this one, that's a hard thing to swallow. Like I've
Mm,
heard Star Wars theory, I think, talking about how when one of the reasons Anakin fell was because he was taken away from his family, and then Yoda just sits him down and says it doesn't matter when people die, you should just learn to let go. Like you can't say that to a kid. And to me, I was thinking like I understand what you're saying if you don't understand the religion's perspective of the world, but the Jedi
mhm.
have a religious perspective of the world. Like
Yes.
as a religious person myself, I haven't suffered loss to like to that kind of a degree. Like I have no one in my immediate family has died or something, but
Mhm.
I still think that when someone dies, it's not that you'll never see them again. I
Yeah.
think that it's just like there'll be a period of time in which you won't be able to talk to them, and then later you'll meet them later. So
Yeah.
whether I'm right or wrong is irrelevant. The point is that I don't. Therefore,
Sure.
I wouldn't be as sad if someone died, and especially
Yeah.
in the Star Wars world where you have even if no one transformed into the Force yet during the prequels, you still
Sure.
had holocrons of people or visions of people or like you still had a way to interact with people that died. Like everyone understood that there was a plane of existence beyond the physical world they were living in. So I don't see
Yes.
how it's a problem to claim to say to someone like stop being so selfish and demanding people stay in your life when it's their time to go. You should rejoice in the fact that God or the Force, whatever you want to say, had that was their time for them to go, and then later you'll see them again. Like I didn't, I was completely on Yoda's side in that conversation. Like
Yeah.
there's no reason for you to get frustrated that you're not gonna that someone will die. Like
Well,
they're just joining into the oneness of the universe, and you'll see them later.
sure. And isn't that a better thing to teach kids? Because like the reality is people die. Like, and being able to have the idea that, hey, maybe this isn't the end, like, sometimes that's what gets you through that. Um, and and as for, like, I mean, I believe that I agree that it's, yeah, that's what we're gonna I believe there's more after death. What that looks like, I have no idea. And, I haven't studied much, like, I don't particularly find eschatology particularly interesting, so I haven't dug into that stuff particularly well. At this point, I kind of say, if the God who created the world and me and everything has made this, and this is the corrupted side, like, I'm gonna have to trust him with my eternity because I don't have any options anyway. Um,
Yeah.
and I think, yeah, like, wouldn't it be better to hope for, if you, and I have my personal reasons for believing that beyond, you know, what I can express well to people and things like there, there's a very difficult idea of being able to, the idea of being able to explain some of one's beliefs like empirically. It's kind of difficult to do. A lot of stuff is anecdotal at best. Um, but yeah, I mean, wouldn't it but take all of that out, wouldn't it be better to hope for more and and live as if there were more and, you know, assume that it isn't the end than to live as if it were otherwise?
I would say yes, but I think there's a balance there. Meaning,
Sure.
if you are only living for the next world and your life here is miserable, so
Yes.
you might be wrong. Like you have to find, like anything else, you should find a balance. I see Ruth asked about postmodernist position. Does it allow for an afterlife? And if not, does the separation of death is permanent to them and therefore the ultimate loss? So
Mm,
I don't know if it's a postmodernist specific thing, but I think anyone who doesn't believe in a creator doesn't believe in an afterlife.
sure.
Um, but even with that said, there's this, I think it's a Christian idea that, like, I think it's the Lord's Prayer. Well, I accept the things I can't. Like, I'll try to change the things I can. And I'll accept the fact that some things I can't, and I don't worry about it. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. Um,
Yeah, it's not the Lord's Prayer, but I'm
oh,
familiar with that one. Yeah.
okay. So, but like, everyone's going to die. You're not going to get away with
Mm,
that. No one in any, no one knows anyone who has lived forever. So
yes.
even if it's shocking that someone dies, like even if you don't expect someone to die, you do know that people die unexpectedly all the time. So
Yes.
I don't understand why people are so sad when someone dies, when that's obviously going to happen. You should have planned for it, at least emotionally. Like Peterson says, like, if you want to be a good person, one of the things you could do is like be the person at a funeral that everyone else can rely on.
Yes. I think that's easy.
Easier said than
The
done.
trick It is, because the trick is that when you lose somebody unexpectedly, no matter how prepared and on your pedestal or your foundation, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
um, pedestal has an accusatory connotation. But no matter how prepared you are, or you think you are, if you lose somebody unexpectedly, especially if they're young,
Mm-hmm.
like that's gonna knock you. Like, and I'm not sure how. That's actually something I've been really trying to figure out. Is like, okay, there's a certain amount of tragedy that you can prepare for that is unexpected and chaos and all of that. Um, but like, what do you do when you're what do you do to rebuild when you do get knocked down by that in spite of your best efforts to get over that? Like, I left that religious organization that I was a part of, like a year and a half ago. It wasn't that long ago. And like 3 years ago, if you would have asked me if I was leaving, I would have told you not a chance. Like, it was only because I happened to be seeing some things properly. And while I was in that organization, I am going to bring this back around. So that, just so you know,
Take your time.
while I was in that organization, I had meaning. And like everything I did was within that particular framework. And I actually lost a friend who was 3 years younger than I am, who like I had just spent 3.5 weeks with her and her sister, and we had like I had just gone up to vacation where they were, and it was like this wonderful time, and we were becoming better friends and all this stuff, and like we had been good friends and pen pals for years, but I was like, oh man, we've got all these cool things to talk about now when I go home and all this. And a week later she got hit by a truck and died instantly. And yeah, it was this crazy, like she was out walking on the side of the road and just like that. And um I was able to handle that within the framework of knowing, okay, well, I don't think this is the last time I will ever see her. Thankfully, she was like the I think the truest Christian that I have ever met. And so if anybody is going to be saved, like,
Yeah.
I think she would have been that it. And so like, my hope is in Christ alone in that, and that's fine. And I hope someday I will see her again. And within the framework of the institution that I was in, like I was able to move on and have a life. Now, when I left that institution and the framework from which I derived most of the meaning of my life disappeared, that was like a new kind of tragedy.
Yeah.
Um, because okay, now um
You're in chaos.
that was almost it was total chaos, and so now like I'm having to process things like the death of my friend that happened 3 years ago, that I'm like, okay, well, now I don't have all these things that were kind of holding me together. So how do I handle that now? And how do I handle, like I was in a pretty good spot ish before I left, um but now this whole framework's gone. Like how do I build back up after not having that anymore? Those are the kinds of things that, how do you build order from chaos, and how do you find meaning
Hmm.
when you haven't really
Well,
like got that,
when you left this community, did you
Mhm.
so like when I left the community I was born into, it wasn't just that
Yeah,
I left the community, like I changed everything about me. Like,
sure.
but it seems like to me like you had certain issues with the community, but that doesn't mean that you're abandoning the core foundations of your belief system.
No,
So
no. But because they practice shunning,
yeah,
it's
that's
being able to tell the truth meant basically the death of, for all intents and purposes, most of the people I knew and loved.
including your family.
Thankfully, no.
That's
My
good.
family all kind of, yes, thankfully, we all kind of started to see the same thing all around the same time,
Uh-huh.
which was nothing short of miraculous.
Yeah,
Most of us. There are
that's quite
some,
helpful.
yeah, yeah. I would probably still be stuck in there if my family hadn't also been seeing the same things. I would have probably been convinced that I was not seeing things correctly, and that's a whole other.
Well, so it's fascinating how people can't or have a difficult time making decisions because it'll affect other people, even if they know it's right. Or like, for instance, when
Yes.
I was becoming more religious, so it was in college we had a certain rabbi come and give classes to, like
Hmm.
there was like a 10-week thing you could take classes and then you could take a trip to Israel. And one of my really good friends did this before me. He did all these classes. He was going to go to Israel, and he backed out like 2 days before. So I asked him a few years later, like, what happened? I never asked you. And he said, "Oh, I realized that if I went on that trip, I would have became religious, and my parents would have hated me, and I couldn't have done that to my parents."
Huh.
And that was like weird to me because I don't make decisions about whether if I think something's right or wrong. Like I'll just do what I think is right, and if people are upset with me, hopefully they come around. Like, how can I do something that I know to be wrong if just because people will be mad? Like, but granted, I'm quite a introvert and don't care about people's feelings too much, which it has good sides and downsides to it. But so I can tell you this because I mean when
Yeah.
I left my world, I guess you could say, in 2006, so it's been
Hmm.
quite a while. Um, and no one was happy with me. No one.
Sure.
And they all were assumed I was brainwashed, and like every conversation I had with anyone from that where I grew up always reverted
Mhm.
to, you should just come back, and that obviously you're doing stupid things, and shouldn't you go back? Let's do the things we used to do. And I was like, please stop, right? And but
Yeah.
after a while, because I kept saying what I thought was true, even though we don't agree, but like with my family and other people as well, like those relationships got. I've never had a better relationship with my parents than I do now,
Yes.
because
Uh,
eventually we both came around to realize, like, if we're so different but we love each other so much, we can learn from each other and we can grow together. And now we actually have meaningful conversations as opposed to just silly nonsense that we had before.
yeah. I'm glad to hear that. And I mean, it goes into what Jordan Peterson says about tell the truth and you'll have the adventure
Mm-hmm.
of your life,
Yep,
right?
yep.
Like, I mean, that's where I feel like I am. I feel like I am personally in the wandering in the desert phase at this point after escaping tyranny. But like I'm excited because there is a promised land side of it coming, and like it is I have learned in telling the truth who my real friends are.
Yeah.
I've actually had some people who were a part of that group that I left, strangely, like this group that had been apart for like decades. My local branch, it's just a small group of churches. There were like 5 or 6 churches total. And my local church that I had been a part of, they actually split, and there was this whole, um it is just all this crazy stuff right after I left. So I've actually had some people
Mm.
reach out to me, or I've reached out to them even since that happened. And like I've had people apologize to me and go, "You were right. You were seeking for deeper truth, and we just couldn't see it at the time." And
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that was amazing.
yeah.
And the people who won't talk to me or haven't talked to me or whatever, like that I've realized who my real friends are. Um, and the people that I've actually been able to have conversations with and stuff, just like you said with your family, um, they just because I'm more committed to telling the truth and making sure that, I hold my ground if I disagree and stuff like that, that I've actually I would say the friendships that I have now, in spite of the fact that I no longer have that framework that I used to have, like, the friendships I have now are definitely deeper and based on a much better foundation of truth than they ever had been before.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So I see why you think that Luke is better.
Yeah, not everybody agrees, and what do you think? What
So
do you like Luke or the
I don't dislike him. I think that
Obi-Wan's still the best character, though.
Qui-Gon's the best character. He's the most right. I myself
He's pretty good.
identify with Qui-Gon more than anyone else. Although I would have
Okay.
really liked Count Dooku to live and them to have done more with the separatist idea, because they were right,
Mm.
obviously. But in terms of the Jedi, Luke is at a disadvantage because he's missing a lot of information, and he'll never get it back. Right? Qui-Gon was
Yeah.
the person who walked the balance between recognizing the the necessity of the order. Like, the Jedi Order is called the Jedi Order for a reason, right?
Right.
But also he understood that you need to be open to new ideas and new things, and just because the order is a certain way doesn't mean you have to do everything they say, but that also doesn't take away the value and the necessity of the order. So uh, one of the rabbis that I had years ago,
Mhm.
There's a thing in the Jewish community, or the Jewish religious community now. Hold on one sec.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah. There's a thing in the Jewish religious community that people should learn a lot of about the religion as opposed to working so much. Um, and the public stance that he had was always like, never get a job, just learn. And I remember someone came to him in private and basically said, look, we don't have enough money for food. We really need help. I can't just not get a job. So he looked at him, the rabbit that told everyone in public you should never get a job, looked at him and said, like, are you stupid? Why don't you have a job yet? And he was like, well, you told me not to get a job. He's like, no, I told you that that's the ideal. If you could focus your life on getting to know God more, that's what you should do. But obviously you shouldn't starve. Like, that's just stupid, right? Like, so I think that's what you need. You need, like, this is the ideal that we should all live up to. However, you should also
Yeah.
recognize in yourself that you'll never be able to live up to that standard, and you have to pursue your interest and do things that you need to do, even if they're against the quote unquote order, and find your balance in that. And I think that's what Qui-Gon's character was. He was the one
Yeah.
who's like, the order is very important. I'm not going to, tell them they're wrong. But also, when I'm not there and I'm by myself, I can say, like, well, actually, this is probably a better way to do it. Right? Like, they told me I couldn't train you, Anakin, but just stay next to me and watch what I do. Like, I'm not breaking rules, but I'm also pushing the place forward. So that's where I think people should be. But I also think that it takes a certain person to be like that, right? I would argue that most people in the world, I mean, just look around right now, most people aren't thinking for themselves for most of the time. They're just absorbing what is being told to them, and they're just going along with the flow of society. So as a result of, I would say like 95% of people are like that. So if that's true, so if you have a Jedi order or order in general that says, like, this is how you should live your life, and the 95% of the people in that order will grow up and pursue moral things, and they'll stay in the order. Will they do some things that are silly? Sure, but better that than chasing your hedonistic pleasures and do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Like, you can't just have chaos. But for the people that are thinking, like, that's the Luke Skywalker who's supposed to go out and leave what he knows and bring more information. He's the hero archetype, right? He goes out, he gets the new information, and he brings it to the community and says, this is what I found. You can be upset with me about it, but in 20 years, you're probably going to adopt it, and everything will be good. So
yeah. Are you still there, Ari?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. You said so, and then did you say anything else, or did you drop off there?
No, I think that's the end of the comment.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, no, I like that. I think and that's where I think you get into some of the, having the values from within versus without. And, like, because I relate much more to the Obi-Wan character, and, like, so I was very happy in a structure that gave me, meaning and stuff. And it's interesting because it sounds to me like you have more of, like, those internal values, which are things like this is something I've been actually contemplating a lot lately for myself, is like, truth is clearly one of the core things that is important to me, because I was willing to put everything I knew on the line to tell the truth. But, what do I have inside of me that gives me meaning beyond that? And here, I'll bring up something that some people find mildly controversial within the psychological realm. Are you familiar with the Myers-Briggs stuff at all?
Yeah.
Do you happen to know what type yours is?
No.
Okay. Because when from the surface, Myers-Briggs stuff is not particularly useful, but when you start getting into, like, some of the cognition stuff, you get into, like, where people derive their values from and stuff like that. So I was just curious if you knew, because I believe it would be defined in that particular realm. I guess at this point it's more for Ruth Ann's benefit if she's familiar, but as, like, external feeling versus internal, extroverted feeling versus introverted feeling, they're like two separate just modes of different ways that people can think. But anyway, because it sounds like what you're describing to me sounds like, um, your stuff is more based on, like, what you know to be true, whereas I happen to be more like I think I'm typically more driven by like of course it's what I know to be true, but I think I'm more open to being persuaded or maybe I just got lazy doing that growing up or something like that. But anyway, not particularly useful if you're not familiar with that and uh
I mean, I understand the difference between external knowledge and internal knowledge, and um, I would say that I didn't I don't like trusting the voice inside of my head, whatever you want to call it, like where you have an intuition that something should be. Like I don't like listening to that.
sure.
I would rather use my reason to figure out what is true and not true, or beneficial or not beneficial. But I think that the fact in my life, the fact that I couldn't come my reasoning was going against my emotions to such a degree that I recognized that something was missing. I didn't
Okay.
recognize something was good. I recognized what couldn't be.
Mm,
But I still think
yeah.
I'm building, like I became religious not because of a feeling, but because that allowed me, like you said before about politics, you have to like go to the school of hard knocks. You have to be woken up for a bad term, but you have to get hit in the face, let's say, to realize that uh, to be open to hearing the other side, something has to happen to allow you to let it in. So
Sure.
that internal voice, or that recognition that my reason alone wasn't enough, was that opened up the possibility that I should pursue researching God and religion and see if there was a reasonable, if there was an intellectual reason to follow him.
Yes. Okay. All right. Yeah, that makes sense. I would say I typically yeah, I think we both go at things from on a more intellectual level than feeling. That was the the cognition portion when you start getting into the deeper MBTI stuff like that's just what the function is called, not it's not so much about the feeling itself. But yeah, no, that um yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Um just the rationality side of it. Like, yeah, you got to be open to it um and be able to just consider things and go, okay, which of these seems more true, I suppose. Is that a fair way to put it, do you think?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool. Well, uh, did you want to talk any more about episode 8 or anything else? I know we've gotten all over the place, and I apologize if I've gotten us too sidetracked.
It wasn't just
But
you. I think that in
all
general,
right, good.
good conversations, they go to random places.
Yes, same. Uh, Ruth Ann saying finding the balance. Yeah,
Yeah, I agree. It was a good conversation.
yeah. All right, cool. Well, so at the end of the day, we have to find the balance in the force and walk that line between order and chaos, huh?
For sure.
All right. Well, thanks for your time, Ari, and this was fun. I would love it if you have any feedback on where I am lacking in my discussion skills to be able to be better about this stuff. I'd be happy to hear it if you think of anything that I can improve. Feel free to send me some stuff on Discord or whatever.
I'm
This is
de-
definitely
I'm definitely not like a expert in that, but if I think of
well,
something,
if there was anything yeah, well, if there was anything I said in particular that you were like or any particular way that I put things that you're like, "Boy, that was annoying," or "She could do that better," you
no,
know? Feel free.
I don't think you did anything like that. I think that you were clearly trying to say what you actually believed, and therefore it's beneficial.
Alright, cool. Well, yeah, I certainly had a lot of fun. Ruth, thanks for, joining us. It was nice having you here, and, uh and yeah, we'll be looking forward to if we do something like this again. I appreciate the opportunity, Ari. There was a part of me that wanted not to do this, and there was a part of me that was like, I'd rather just be here underprepared than not have at least gone at it and tried it anyway. So I appreciate the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, my pleasure. I think I should say that Twitter, who's the moderator on the Discord, he said the
Yeah.
same thing to me after the first event that he did, where he gave he talked about Dune Messiah. He's quite young, and he basically said like, I never would have done that, but because of the people in the Discord and on Peterson Academy in general, um, he felt like comfortable enough to put himself out there and just start talking. And I think that
Yeah.
that's the main reason I wanted to join Peterson Academy, was because I assumed, I think correctly, that the people that would join were people that wouldn't criticize you because of they're not trying to win points, they're trying to pursue truth. And therefore,
Yeah.
if you say something silly, you're not going to get laughed at, you're just going to politely be told or explained how you could do better. I don't
Yes.
And I think that because it's such an open community in that way, people are excited to join and willing to put themselves out there, which I think is great.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been struck by how open people are, and I've been grateful for the just ability to be, how would I like, just sincere. I think it's been really cool to see everybody like sincerely aiming after the truth and being willing to discuss things one way or another, whether we agree on them or not, and come to some, whether we agree at the end of the day or not, but be able to sharpen our I don't know, our ability to express what we think and stuff like that.
Yep. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise. Have a good evening, Ari.
Yeah,
Take
you
care,
too.
Ruth Ann.
Yeah, bye.
We'll see you guys.